Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 37 of Distressed Deals Decoded, where real estate problems meet real solutions. Brought to you by your friends at Asset Resolution Advisors. So, today, we're going to be diving into an issue about the emerging opportunities for real estate investors and real estate agents. We were just talking about this. Are we back to 2008? So, what we're going to talk about is what the differences are between today and 2008. And today I have my two esteemed colleagues. First, Juan Nicasio, Mr. ACQ in the house.
Hello, everyone.
And I've got Patrick Butler.
Buenos tardes, everybody. Nice to be here.
All right. So, the question here that we started talking about, we were talking right before this podcast, and we've been talking for the last week is, are we back to 2008? I don't think that we've got another housing crash like we did before. But we're talking about something that for those who have worked in the distressed real estate during the Great Recession remember pretty well. We also know that there are a lot of you who are newly into the real estate market, newly meaning you've been in the last 15 years and didn't see what went on during that time. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about it and break down about similarities and differences and why this is different, why it's similar. So the first things that we get from a lot of people, servicer decisions, some that just seem to defy common sense. We're seeing this increasingly more across files that economically they look like a short sale would be a logical solution to everybody. However, the servicer's process or their staffing or their guidelines or their checklists that keep coming in front of you for the transaction seems to be going around in circles and in loops and going nowhere. And a perfectly viable short sale gets delayed or inevitably just canceled over some technicalities. You're probably seeing servicers who refuse a solution that could mitigate the loss only for the property to eventually move forward with a foreclosure and an REO, where ultimately they sold the property far less than what you had it listed for and had an offer on. Uh,
Amen.
Maybe you have deals that documents are rejected because the document says street spelled out fully and the other one says ST period or just ST or just STR. Meanwhile, foreclosure deadlines don't stop and everything keeps going forward. So, what is going on here? Where's the craziness? Where's the logic in all this? How did we get back to this place where following the process that was created 16, 17 years ago sometimes seems to be much more important than actually getting the sale done and minimizing the loss? So, we're going to dig into all of the different things here. So, Juan, why does this feel
Yeah.
like 2008 again?
Well, I mean, there's a big distinction though, right? Like we're not saying that we're back in 2008, but it sure seems like it feels like it. I believe you hit it right on the nose when you mentioned there is a lot of folks, real estate professionals that have never seen the 2008 debacle that we went through. And so, we have to be very clear on the servicer side what we mean by that as well. Meaning, you guys are new to real estate per se. You've been in the business for 15, 20 years. It's still relatively new compared to folks that were in the business back in 2008. What people don't think about is the servicing departments are all new people as well. A whole bunch of people were fired. We have a whole slew of new individuals that have never gone through a 2008 type of situation. So what feels like 2008 is more so on the servicer side. And what we're encountering is a lot of the things that you pointed out. Decision making just feels completely irrational, right? Or economically out of order. Inconsistent answers from different servicer and representative. Why? Because you have to think about 2008 happened, and then you also had COVID, where we had a slew of new individuals, and someone has to ramp them up as fast as humanly possible, meaning that the full training isn't there. So you're getting, for lack of a better word, you're getting half-ass work being done. They don't really understand the distressed asset side of things, and they're juggling through files like nobody's business, right? A lot of these representatives who may understand their checklist, they went through a training, says I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forms. They don't understand the larger transactions, right? Or how to get the transaction over the hill. They're not going above and beyond. They're not really using common sense to get these things done. Very little flexibility because they are literally going through this one checklist. And if it's out of whack and it doesn't fit, hey, back of the pile, right? And that's why we have so many delays. Like you mentioned earlier, minor documentation discrepancy, right? Like it's instead of saying the whole word street, the file came in with an ST back of the line as well. So it's creating major delays for very minute things that you would think, hey, come on, that's kind of easy to determine. That stands for street. Let's keep the file moving. Loss mitigation seemingly more focused on completing the process, the checklist, than finding the best economic outcome for the deal or for the servicer, for the bank, right? To just clear out the debt and get us to a solution. They're more concerned of like, well, the checklist says this, and if A plus B doesn't equal C, well, we can't do D, right? And so, Steve, that understand servicing at a much higher level, what are you actually seeing different today, or is it simply just seeing the old problems coming back?
It's both. So we are seeing some of the old problems, right? And you brought up really good points about the servicers, right? Which is in '07 and '08, most servicers didn't have robust loss mitigation groups. There were nobody.
Mm,
And we had the Great Recession, and there were a lot of delinquencies. So the groups were newly created at most of the servicers, brand new people who knew nothing about loss mitigation. So they
right.
were all brand new. We're seeing the exact same thing now. A lot of brand new people in loss mitigation who don't know what loss mitigation is. So there are a lot of similarities between the two that you pointed out in the facts you brought up. It's different in that we have a little bit of a more mature process. The problem is that which is different than '08. And what we're finding now is back in '08, it was the Wild West. Everybody kind of did whatever processing a short
Mm,
sale. They didn't do BPOs, they didn't do appraisals. You just put an offer in, you just took, whatever. So there was fraud. There was quite a bit of fraud back then. And that over the years has been taken out. The problem is that all of the safety guards that were put in place are not fully understood now by the new people. And so I don't understand why it's there. So I don't understand why, oh, for instance, the abbreviation street of ST versus street written out is okay. They don't understand because their guidelines say, oh, everything has to match exactly. Yeah, what has to match exactly is it says that Joe Smith is buying the property, not Joe Smith Jr. and Lisa Smith. It has to say Joe Smith, right? So they've taken it a bit too far to the extreme, which is causing a lot of issues. Economics, same type of things. There are, they just don't understand the big picture. So it's different in that sense, but in some ways it's similar, and it's kind of the both situations coming up. So yeah, good question. All right, Patrick.
Sir.
One of the big areas of change happened during COVID. What happened?
Well, a lot of people got sick. Remember? That was 2020, St. Patrick's Day. I'll never forget it. Yeah, a lot of things happened. It's funny as I'm listening to this discussion here, I think back to my days when I was in the Navy. I only served 4 years, but one of the things you said, Juan, about the new folks coming in, whether you served in the military or an athletic team or anything, You remember the first day you got there and the coach gave you the checklist, bring your sneakers if you're, if it's football or soccer, bring your shoes, bring your uniform, make sure you take a shower, all these things, very elementary, and you got schooled on that. And after time, when you become the professional soccer player or the elite military person down the road, the difference between what you got trained on day one and what you actually do later on is vastly different. And this shutdown during COVID, where the servicers basically said, and they, by the way, have to do this, they act on a dollar for dollar scale, like, okay, well, there's no more foreclosures happening for the foreseeable future. We don't need anybody in the foreclosure department. They're gone. We don't have to worry about foreclosures piling up and regulators. So let's get rid of loss mitigation. So a lot of things happen, but even more intriguingly is the regulatory environment change, right? So in the last couple of years, the one thing that we used all the time, Steve and I, in our previous life in loss mitigation, was the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, or the CFPB. In fact, Steve and I just had this conversation today. I've been going through, I maintain a mortgage license. I don't originate loans, but I keep the license because it's pretty. And I went through my continuing ed, and half of it was about CFPB. So I said to Steve, CFPB is still there. Why is it that, we can't leverage them like we did? And Steve said to me, he goes, yeah, they're there. You can file complaints, but there's no enforcement. It basically goes into deaf ears. And back in the day, the lender would get smacked down for it. They would get financially dinged amongst other things, and it made a difference for them. They had to resolve that. Well, today, not so much the case. In fact, back in 2008, you may recall some other things that happened that we're not seeing today. Major financial institutions went by the wayside. Giant insurance companies, banks that were too big to fail got eradicated and then had to get bailed out. Thank you very much, US taxpayer dollars. And all of these things have now come to roost where we are again. Secondly, the servicer staffing change. I don't need to go back through that again, but that's a big deal. When you've got to teach somebody on the other end of the telephone or the computer their job because they are checking off tick marks that don't make any sense, it makes life a lot more challenging. Not impossible. Thankfully, we have the experience at Asset Resolution Advisors, and that's why we do what we do. That's why we encourage you as investors and as real estate professionals, or even our bankruptcy trustee friends, reach out to us. We know how to circumvent and navigate through these things in a positive and meaningful manner. Yeah, so the staffing numbers are down as well. Not only did the talent walk out the door, all the very well schooled, experienced processors, but they've also lowered the numbers. Steve, I think you said that the average loss mit person during a general peak cycle is about 150 cases that they can manage at any given time at the high end. And now they're handling over 300, closer to 400 cases. So once again, you're dealing with the inexperience that's touching these files. They're stressed out. They're human beings, folks. They're not AI yet. And it's a challenge as well. So all of these things add pain, anxiety, and frustration to the thing. So basically, we collectively that are doing short sales and other types of loss mitigation work have to be aware of that and have to guide these folks the right way. Butting heads is not going to solve the problem. Calling them 5 times a day is not going to solve the problem. Helping them get through the file is going to help solve the problem. And the more files you have with them, the better off it is. But sometimes even that doesn't always help, Steve. There's other reasons. What are some of those?
Yeah, so there's some funny things that go on behind the scenes, right? That we don't see, and it's all politics internally. It can sometimes be very frustrating. I get very frustrated by it because it gets silly, right? So if you think about it, right, we've got a property where we've got a short sale. It will produce a significantly better recovery than foreclosure. We know this, right? It's logically speaking, you can kind of see properties deteriorating. It's not going to go up in value, only down in value. You have a foreclosure. We've got one with the servicer right now. And it's a good example with one of the major, investors. And they looked at a deal and they said, oh, this is not good enough. Well, here's the thing. Property's been listed for almost a year now. and the value that came back from the servicer and their investor was only $20,000 below, or sorry, it was right at where we have it listed. Our offer was about $30,000 below. So they declined the offer, and I asked for a counter. I said, hey, give me a number that I counter the buyer. No, no, it's okay. Do you want to do a deed in lieu? I'm like, I looked up the foreclosure. The foreclosure hearing for the judgment is not until May of 2027. Now put this in your mind. They are going to, this is going to cost them $100 a day, $200 a day of holding costs. They're going to be in the $30,000 to $40,000 range by the time they get the judgment. Then they have to list it. Then they have to sell it. Then they have, or sorry, then they have to list it for foreclosure. Then they have to sell it. They're going to be in the $50,000, $60,000 range of losses. And they're worried about 30 grand and they won't give me a counter. So what's going on? Why is this happening? Why won't they counter? Well, it's not necessarily just the servicing functions. They've got certain loss mitigation has certain rules that they have to follow. Foreclosure has a different set of rules, and claims have a different set of rules, and REO has a different set of rules. Ultimately, each of these departments in the servicer and at the investor level, they all have different economic realities themselves. So from the loss mit side, they're saying, well, if I take a $30,000 loss, that goes on my P&L, my profit and loss. I can't take $30,000 loss because they're not going to get all my money back. If I just kick the can down over to foreclosure, it's no longer my problem, it's their problem. Mm-hmm. And the foreclosure looks at it and says, we could take a $50,000 loss. It doesn't matter. We're going to get the money back. We were expecting an $80,000 loss on that. So we really didn't lose as much as we thought. That's okay.
It's a win. We won.
Right. But here we are all sitting going, wait a minute. Your company could have taken a $30,000 loss. Instead, you're taking a $50,000 loss, and you as a company are happy about that? And the underlying answer is, well, the executives who manage that P&L are not looking at the nuances of what loss mit is doing or what this is doing. They're just looking at their small little world that they're working in. And so while the irony of the whole deal is they probably would have had less losses, in the big picture of things, they can't put things together. They don't know as a company how that really affects them. They're all worried about their own individual silos. And so at the end of the day, where the big disconnect is, servicers say, we lost, but we're going to file an insurance claim with the investor. And the investor says, oh, you did everything you could. Oh, thanks for trying to get more money. Okay, we'll pay you back money. Meanwhile, hidden in all of this is you guys didn't have to pay out as much, but that's not really what they're looking. And so that's kind of the curtain behind the scenes of what's going on with mortgage servicing and why it's very frustrating that from a business standpoint, everything makes sense, and why we can't get the quick answers. That's just part of what's going on. All right. So Patrick, that's one piece of it. The next piece.
So
death by checklist.
Before Juan tells us what the hell we need to do about all this stuff, we talked about all this stuff with the nuances that cause files to get delayed, missing periods at the end of an abbreviation or whatever. But there's a lot of other impact that occurs, right? Well, all this nonsense is going on, documents start to expire, right? So, we hear this all the time, hey, realtors, you don't have to work with a third-party company. Just submit the file. It's not 2008 anymore. It's 20 years later. It's 18 years later. Well, that's the problem. And so by just submitting documentation, it may seem easy, while you're fresh and, you've got the wind in your sails. I just made put together a contract for my listing and I've submitted the short sale. Hopefully it'll close in 45 days. Well, then all of a sudden you spend the next 6 months regurgitating the same documents over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And these are the kind of things that can really put a damper on your day. And that's just if you're dealing with one. Imagine if you're prolific and you're a good business developer, you've got 5 or 6 of these things going on. Well, guess what your full-time job just became? Short sale processor. And I'm not sure if you got into the business for that, We did, interestingly enough, only because we've been doing this for so long. There's no reason why you should have to do that. So, with all this stuff, Juan, what is it that our dear friends and colleagues out there in real estate land can be doing to simplify their lives?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, six different items that they can do to really do like make a difference in what they're doing, right? Number one, you nailed it on the head. Like you didn't get into the business to process short sales and talk to servicing companies, being on hold for 45 minutes to an hour on one file and then jump to the next servicing company and spend another 45 to an hour to talk about the next file. So first and foremost, work with asset resolution advisors to minimize these simple little issues that you don't deal with on a day to day. While the file is easy for some reps to process, it's easy for them to move through the queue and these changes make a big dramatic result to the outcome. So stop treating distressed deals like a normal transaction. The number one thing that people must do is underwrite before they submit. Too many people just says, "Oh, well, this is a short sale. Let's go ahead and list it and let's go and send an offer." They don't know if they're dealing with the right owner. They don't know if there's multiple debts on there, what kind of loan it is. You don't know if it needs to be listed for, 3, 4 days, 2 weeks before you can take an offer, or is this a reverse mortgage where typically you maybe not even have to go ahead and list it. Now you delayed yourself X period of time. You don't know the foreclosure status, so you're here thinking, oh, I'm going to go ahead and submit it as a short sale, and hopefully I'll get an offer before the a foreclosure. Maybe you didn't even know it was a foreclosure. You listed the property, and then boom, property's gone because you didn't even know that there was a foreclosure date coming. You don't understand value, so you're listing the properties dead wrong. We've seen that so many times where sometimes investors want to list it for a property that's worth 300,000. They want to list it for 100, 150,000, 120,000. It's like, what are you doing? Like, you're really ruining the whole thing out the gate. The potential exit strategies. A lot of people don't understand what they cannot do with that particular file. So underwriting, which if you watch any of our other podcasts, we will chime that until our face turns blue, because that's the number one thing is underwriting, underwriting, underwriting. Submitting a clean package. We've spoken about this before. Look at everything, assume all the small inconsistency, make you understand that it does matter. We spoke about even as simple as the street address, ST versus street. That is a big deal, so you need an eye of attention on all of your files to make sure that everything aligns: the name, the addresses, the signatures, the dates, financial information that may not be needed, that all of it has to match. Number three, don't assume that the person you're speaking with understands the entire file. Okay. So, from a servicer standpoint, they may not know what the heck is going on. And so, don't make an assumption that when you submit it, that they should know it all. Again, working with a company like ARA, we understand all the servicers. We have multiple conversations with them on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. We have multiple files that we're speaking to them on, so we understand, all like the P's and Q's of every single servicer. So we speak a bit of a different language when we call. Number four, know when to escalate. Just because you didn't get an answer in 2 days after submitting your file doesn't mean that you go and have a legitimate reason to go ahead and ask for an escalation. It's going to lead absolutely nowhere. There's a difference between a legitimate guideline and an incorrect interpretation of that guideline. And so be very, very careful with attacking too hard, calling every single day and hounding these people, because it's not going to serve you right. Not everything is an escalation, especially if you are the one who are making the mistake. Watch out for the foreclosure clock, which we spoke about earlier. Don't assume that loss mitigation activity automatically means that the foreclosure process has stopped. They do not need to stop a foreclosure, even if they are looking at the file as a potential short sale. Typically, you need to submit your case well before like 40 days minimum, before that can actually be taken into account to stop a foreclosure. So you just be very, very careful. And then lastly, expect the unexpected. This is still real estate. Anything can happen at any given moment. So even if a file feels and appears to be very straightforward, maintain and maintain uh, um, uh, full control of the file. Make sure that you have all your P's and Q's, all your dates in order, because any little thing, whether it's something with title, maybe a lien, a judgment that popped up, maybe something happens while you're in the process, some sort of judgment, anything can happen in the case between submission and closing. So maybe there's maybe unusual investor guidelines. Some people submit a deal thinking it's going to be a regular short sale. They don't understand that the actual investor is a hard money lender, completely different guidelines than an FHA, VA, USDA type of loan. Maybe you have some documentation problems. So all of those type of things, you have to be on your P's and Q's. And this is where asset resolution advisors comes into play, because we understand how to look at the entire playbook and how we're supposed to submit each and every single file so that these things are avoided. Okay. So back to you, Steve. So are we back in 2008?
Yeah, and one last point before I close this out and talk about that you brought up one, and I want to stress there are also at the servicer side and the investor side, there are some mistakes also that we see. And those are touchy subjects that you have to navigate properly. And we're seeing it where, investors are not giving proper guidelines. They're not giving proper information. They're saying, oh yeah, close with standard, closing costs, but we need a minimum net. I'm like, wait a minute, closing costs with commission and with titles about a 9% cost structure.
True.
But in their approvals, they're only allowing 4. And it's like, wait, guys, time out. Like, how do you expect us to close with a 4% closing costs and commission when the typical is 9? Even if it was discounted, it would be 8 or 7. You're telling me I need to hit 4. Like, those deals are just dead.
Like how?
And
Yeah.
right. And they're looking at it and scratching their head and going, I don't know what you're talking about. And so they're missing the boat in a lot of cases. We see this quite a bit. And we're talking to them and they don't get it. And they go foreclose and we're like, so what happened here? I paid 9% when I closed my REO. Yeah, a year later and you lost $50,000. Oh, I see what you're saying now. Right? So we're getting that. We're going back into that they're just people making mistakes and assumptions, and so it is happening, and you have to know how to navigate it, right? I think you said that one. So, that's what we're here for. Are we back to '08? No, we're not back to '08. And it's really important for agents and investors to understand that you can't act that way anymore, right? Investors back in '08 would just throw in any number, most likely get approved, and they would just move on, go, ooh, I just made a 6-figure turn because I put in a low offer. That doesn't happen anymore. Real estate agents are coming back to, oh, I did a short sale in '08. We're going to just crush this. We're going to do this like we did it back then. Times have changed. It's not the same way, right? Back in '08, when they were staffed properly, you had one person per every 100 files. You're now at one person per every 400 files. They're going to talk to you about once a month, maybe on your one short sale. Where we bring in power, where we bring in the advantages is, for instance, I was looking up some of the stuff. We're working with one of the servicers between listings and negotiations, 25 files, 25. With another one, it's 12. With another one, it's 7. With another one, it's 8. So that brings volume power. Yeah, it's not thousands, but it brings volume power compared to one that really help, right, in this market. So I think from a housing perspective, we're not back at '08. I think we're seeing some distress. I think we're going to see some fluctuations in the market. But anybody who's worked in the distress market, they kind of see familiar signs, right? Servicer issues, pricing issues, a lot of things, right? Less experienced staff, rigid systems, departments still operating like silos. We've got checklists that are predominant over just plain common sense. And to what we just talked about, decisions where economic solutions today are probably better than the entire process will go, but it just doesn't matter. That is exactly where our experience and experience in general helps. And
Yeah.
understanding how all this works is a really big opportunity for today's agent and the investor. Don't complain about the system. Don't figure out how to fight against it against your one. Come and work with us. Come and work with those of us who have a lot of experience, who work with these people every day for the last 20 plus years, who know how to navigate this and bring some of that volume power. Because the opportunity is knowing how to operate within the system that you have. And even though it sometimes doesn't make sense, it does in the long run of navigating short sales. That's where asset resolution advisors comes in. So before I wrap up, Patrick, Juan, any last words?
Don't do this
Mm,
yourselves, guys.
yeah,
Get
no,
that.
I think you said it perfectly. Yep. Together, everyone achieves more. Team. Let's become a team.
Absolutely. So if you have a short sale or a distressed transaction and the servicer decision has you scratching your head, don't automatically assume that the deal is dead. Submit that deal to asset resolution. Sometimes the answer is no, but sometimes just a matter of following a few simple rules and you just haven't found the right path yet. That's where asset resolution can help you. So if you have questions, reach out. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Come see us on all the social medias, follow us, ask us questions, and let us know how asset resolution can help you. So for now, we'll see you next week.